Okay, awesome. Uh, all right, everybody, welcome to our roundtable. We are working on doing this on a monthly basis, so there'll be more to come if you like what you hear today. For quick introductions, though, my name is Emma. I am Family Promises Outreach and Recruitment Manager, so I work with these two lovely interns, Marnie, who at least on my screen is on the right, and then Emily, who's on my left. Both of these students have worked really, really hard to put kind of an educational experience together. So we're excited to be a part of it. That being said, I wanted to do a quick, just kind of summary of what Family Promise is and does, and why this topic in particular is really important to the work that we do. So Family Promise of Spokane is one branch of a national organization that works to end family homelessness. I think when we often think of homelessness, it is, adults on the side of the street, maybe a little grungier, whatnot. That's a common stereotype, but we don't think of the hundreds of families who don't have a place to go, or maybe they're couch hopping or couch surfing, or they're staying in a motel or things like that. And so Family Promise is really all about equipping families and the community. So people just like you who want to learn more, want to know more, to end that cycle of homelessness so that kids who are growing up in poverty or homelessness today don't have to experience that as adults. We provide a lot of different opportunities and services within that. So we kind of lump them up as we prevent families from becoming homeless through rental assistance and a lot of life coaching, things like that. We do run a handful of shelter programs for whole family units. So we keep the whole family together. That does include cats and dogs. We used to take more animals than that, including snakes and gerbils and parrots. And then things got like a little out of hand. So we had to tone it back a little bit. So now it's only cats and dogs, but we take the whole family. And then we also follow families for up to 2 years after they get into housing to make sure that they're able to maintain the housing with the ongoing life skills and things like that. So that is just a snapshot of Family Promise. We are excited to kind of bring in an expert on the impact of homelessness and other, traumas and challenges on children, as that is about 52% of the people that we serve are under the age of 18. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to Emily. Emily's going to kind of walk you through what to expect here in the next hour. Take it away, Emily.
Hi, so I'm Emily. I'm an intern at Family Promise, and I work to do community engagement. We're super excited to have you guys. So for this event, you can expect it to run about an hour, and I'm going to introduce our guest speaker just here in a second. But if you have any questions throughout his presentation, feel free to message me or Marnie or drop it in the chat, and we will just interrupt him in his presentation and just gonna be like, hey, what's this or what's that? How do you do this? And just to keep a great conversation going. And then after his presentation, we're going to open it up for just general questions, anything you are curious about, want to know in the realms of homelessness, children, anything like that. There are no really bad questions. We love to learn here. So yeah, I'm going to introduce Ty Johnny is our guest speaker. He is a community health worker at Stevens Elementary who works to basically help families and children who are experiencing homelessness or at risk for homelessness. So here you go.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Awesome. Before I go ahead and speak about the work I do and tell you a little bit about myself, I'd like to focus on just Family Promise for the first few moments to help me sort of warm up my voice. First off, I'd like to thank Emily and Marnie for reaching out to me and inviting me to speak to you about what I do. They've been super kind, super helpful, making sure I had, sort of everything ready for this presentation. So thank you, ladies. Also like to turn the spotlight on Family Promise. As Emma mentioned earlier, they do groundbreaking work with the homelessness challenge here in Spokane. And last year, as we all understand, was a very challenging, very tough season, and Open Doors Family Shelter did a awesome job with helping with all of that. And if I remember correctly, during that time, they were just moving to their new location and just settling into the neighborhood. So naturally, what happens when you're just starting to figure things out, a worldwide pandemic takes place. Because 2019 wasn't crazy enough. But these guys handled it with just absolute confidence and did it like champs. So on behalf of all of our mutual clients that I've had the privilege of working side by side with, folks like Serena, Amy, Lynetta, and others, I just want to say thank you so much to what you guys do and what you stand for. Well, without further ado, guys, I'd like to bring you into my world for a bit and speak on a day in the life of a social worker in school. There are just three main things I'd like to talk about. And I hope that these three things will help give you a better understanding of what I do. The first part being who I am. My name is Ty Johnny, and my full name is Hitai Johnny. It's kind of hard to get that pronunciation from the way it's spelled. So much so that at my graduation party, my mother, the great woman that she is, misspelled my name on my graduation cake in front of all our friends, all our families. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is when they spelled Hitai. I guess we'll have to throw the blame on the guy at the bakery. He spelled it Hedie. And as you guys can guess, this was a graduation party. So a lot of the guests that hadn't seen me before they saw the cake first, they were a little confused as to whether we were there to celebrate or mourn, because it was spelled he died instead of Hitai. So we had a pretty good laugh about it. I wasn't scarred by the whole thing. It happens, right? Where was I? I'm a community health worker working for Catholic Charities based out of Stevens Elementary. I'm about 2 blocks-ish away from Open Doors Shelter. And I've been working this role for about 3 to 4 years now. And there are 4 of us total community health workers in school that work for Catholic Charities here in Eastern Washington. One is at Logan Elementary, another at Rogers High School, and the other one at Deer Park Schools. And I'm, of course, located here at Stevens Elementary. So a little bit about me. I'm Marshallese. I'm from the Marshall Islands, but I was raised here in the U.S. I'm fluent in both the English and Marshallese language and culture. I do wear a few different hats within the community. I serve as an assistant pastor at my church, and I'm also a member of the Marshallese Community Advisory Board, or Marshallese CAB, here in Spokane. We've recently become a nonprofit organization, and our goal is to really bring in resources for the fastly growing minority, this population of Pacific Islanders growing here in the Spokane County. And a lot of people ask, Pacific Islanders, why Spokane of all places? And I was telling Marnie and Emily in one of our conversations, I think last week, that, we choose to come to Spokane because it resembles the islands so much, right? The weather is practically identical. No, we come to Spokane and other parts here in the United States mainly because our culture is very family oriented, family centric. So where one goes, many follow. And this is true, I think, for many Pacific Islanders here in the US. So I'm really blessed that I'm able to really give back to my community, both Pacific Islanders and other ethnicities that I'm able to serve here in the community. The second thing I want to talk about is who I serve. So in my role as a community health worker, the three main categories I work with are literally homeless families, doubled up families, and at-risk families. So when I first started off, my target was 51% Pacific Islanders and 49% other. After the first year, after working with them and stabilizing a lot of that people group here in Stevens, we saw that the numbers needed to change to reflect or better reflect the population that we were serving. So we did have that change to 51% literally homeless and 49% doubled up and at-risk families.
Hey, Ty.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give us all kind of a definition of what you consider literally homeless versus doubled up versus at risk?
Absolutely, yeah. So literally homeless is anyone that is, let's say, fleeing domestic violence. We count that as literally homeless. Living in a uninhabitable space like a car, camping in a park somewhere, and also anyone staying in shelters. And there are other things that qualify. For example, if one of these organizations like Family Promise are sponsoring you for a week, let's say in a motel somewhere, we still count that as being literally homeless. And then there's at-risk families. And at-risk is, just like it sounds, families who are at risk of losing their homes. They've received a 3 to 10 day pay or vacate, or they got the eviction letter, went through that whole process. We also count families that are living with family, but due to tension or something else, a landlord finds out that they're living there without having their name on the lease, anything like that, and they're getting kicked out. We count them under that at-risk population. And then doubled up families are just families that are living with others. So staying with your family, friends, or just complete strangers who were kind enough to let them stay with them. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. In a lot of cases, it's not out of kindness. They manipulate, certain situations so that that family can stay with them. So it's a lot of really grimy and sad details that you really have to get into when you're in this type of role. But yes, those are the three general categories that I work with: literally homeless, doubled up, and at risk.
Very cool.
And The Pacific Islander piece, I think is really important because that's a fast growing population here in Spokane, Tri-Cities area, just Eastern Washington in general. And knowing their sort of setup on how they run their household and knowing that culture, most Pacific Islander cultures, they choose to be multi-generational. So being doubled up for them is a lot of the time very different. So doubled up families, we count those as families that live together out of necessity. But a lot of Pacific Islander families live together out of preference. So they choose to have multi-generational homes. They have grandparents, parents, kids, and sometimes even grandkids all living in one big house. And that sometimes is, I think just hearing their story and living as one, I think it's easier in a lot of ways for us because we have, everyone there. We have our babysitters there, cooks, we have our mentors, it's all in one place. Financially, it's easier as well because everyone's, sharing the load. But then there's also the flip side, when tension, takes place and there's disagreements and things like that. So doubled up situations can definitely be tricky.
I feel like in my experience, they're good and like really they do the job until they don't.
Until they don't.
It goes downhill really fast because things get said in haste or anger and you're like, oh, I can't take that back. And now all of a sudden it's not like, oh, let me just make amends with you. It's get out of my house right now. And all of a sudden, there's no safety net.
No. And it's very sad to witness sometimes, but I think one of the beautiful things about my program specifically, so if you guys are aware of Catholic Charities work here in Eastern Washington, specifically one of our sister programs downtown, Rapid Rehousing, they work mainly with literally homeless families. So they provide deposit, move-in costs, things like that. And sometimes they'll even pay rent for the first couple months while the family is trying to get stable. But the thing is, you do have to qualify. You do have to be literally homeless in order to get that assistance. The difference in my program is I'm allowed to work with any of these categories, whether they're doubled up or at risk. So they don't have to be literally homeless for me to assist them financially and just help them look for a home. The primary focus for my job is really housing, but anything in between, anything that prevents stability or the ultimate goal of housing the family I'm working with, those things I also assist with as well. So I think that brings us to the last part or the third part of this presentation, what I do. There's a little, these two things here that Emily and Marnie were able to put on there, really summarize it, but I'm just going to break it down into a couple parts so it's easier to sort of picture what we do on the ground. Initially, when you get your referrals, and the referrals for me are very non-formal. We get referrals from students, even parents that we've worked with in the past, teachers. A lot of our stuff comes through the HEART program. The HEART program really helps with transportation within the Spokane district, and they find out information like where that family's staying, what the situation is, if they're doubled up, if they're staying at a shelter. And that's usually where I get, I want to say 85 to 90% of my referrals from.
Can you give
After that,
an example maybe of like how that would work? Because I think it's really easy to, I think Spokane, among other benefits, we do a
uh-huh,
pretty good job communicating between organizations here.
yes,
And so there's a lot of networking that students like yourselves may not realize is happening in the real world. So I think the general approach is, why do again what somebody else is doing if we can just partner? And so these referrals truly are, in a sense, a handoff, like a, hey, Ty, did you know
yeah,
this
yeah,
person needs some help? And then Ty's like, got him. All right. And then is able to follow up. Um,
exactly. And same thing when I'm, I'm looking for a shelter for, my families. I'll call up Amy, Emma and these guys and just ask, hey, what's our availability over there at Open Doors?
Yeah.
So Spokane, compared to a lot of other places, I won't name names, we do have a lot better connection, and we do have sort of a grasp on how each organization works. And our referral process is probably the first thing that we look at. Who do we send this person to? And knowing the resources within the community is probably the first thing you learn when you join whatever organization you join here in Spokane, because it's really key in order to help any of the clients that you're serving. You really got to know where to send them, or how you can help them, or where the available resource is.
Totally. Yes, that's good. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the referral process, because I think that's so right. So let's say now you've received a family through
Mhm.
a referral from the HEART program.
So basically the first thing I do is I reach out to the family, and just let them know that I got a referral. I really just educate them on what I do as well. And this is just over the phone conversation, letting them know who I am, what I do, and how I can help. And I do also take that time to confirm the living situation, if they're still in that situation or not. If they've found a place and no longer need help, then I just, notate that and move on. Generally, a lot of the families that I reach out to um, are in need of that assistance. And a lot of times they, people being people, we don't like to share that story initially. So sometimes you catch these guys really at the end of it. And you want to try to prevent it before it happens, but a lot of times you're catching them at the point of, moving out, vacating their place, or they've been in their car for a week. So it's sad because, we don't like to share our stories because they're private. They're our stories. But it does make it a challenge in trying to prevent homelessness, and trying to reach it or reach them before they get into that. So after my first phone call, I make an appointment with them, and that very first appointment, this is just the way I approach it. I have no paperwork. There's nothing we're writing down. I'm just listening.
Yeah.
I ask them to talk about their story, let me know sort of what's going on. And to me, you can't really fix the problem if you don't know what it is, if you're not listening. It really takes an effective communicator to really be successful. And a lot of times that communication is just being quiet and just listening to them. And yeah, just slowly building that relationship, earning their trust, and really hearing them out is how I spend the first meeting. The second meeting, it's all about paperwork. We're signing release of informations, intakes, getting all those things done, depending on what they qualify for. For example, if they're literally homeless, I'll sign them up for that rapid piece, and do their intake here. If they're not, I just do their intake under my program because they wouldn't qualify for the rapid stuff because they're doubled up or they're, considered at risk. And that's a great thing about my program is it does help with those types of families. And yeah, it's really making a game plan going from there. A lot of questions along the way. Where are you staying? How long can you stay there? Is there domestic violence? That's always a fun one to ask. Is there domestic violence? I feel like it's always awkward, the reaction you get from that particular question. And a lot of times, like I was saying before, if you don't earn their trust, if you're not really actively listening to them and showing that you care, they won't tell you anything. When I was new to this particular position, I actually had a client that I found out they were in a DV situation after I housed them. This is months and months of working with them. And I didn't know the whole time. As soon as we signed, the lease and she got her keys, she burst into tears and sort of confessed everything, thanking me that we were able to help out and now she's in a safer situation. He doesn't know where they're at. And I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because she's just, now able to trust me. And I think that's why having a good approach and making sure that you're confident to ask hard questions initially, that really helps how you approach and how you proceed with it as well.
That's a great insight, Ty, because one of the challenges I think, at least I would love to hear more of your take on, is how do you balance kind of the time that it takes to earn somebody's trust, but also knowing like you're in kind of a time sensitive situation. Yeah. Like, I want to earn your trust. I want to make sure we can get you where you need to be, but also sometimes in order to qualify for the help you need, you have to tell me everything right off the bat. Because in a sense, the more desperate you look, the more needy you look, the more resources you qualify for. It's that, but how do you navigate that balance?
I really try to make it all about them from the beginning, with that approach of just, this time is for you. I just want to know about your story. I'm asking questions about your life. This is not, in that time, I'm not talking about me, what I do, what I can bring to the table. It's really just highlighting them and their story. And just the approach that you take with people, I think makes it a lot easier. There's a really cheesy saying that I think we've all heard, people don't care how much you know, they only want to know how much you care. That's a very true saying in this line of work. And that's just how I approach everything, every conversation, the way I mitigate certain situations. If I'm talking between them and the landlord, I'm always taking their side. I'm always advocating for them. Never, of course, I know that when they come into the office and they're bringing all of that baggage that they've been told no countless times. And they're already sort of insecure about their past. So I think just the way we approach them, communication, because if you take the time to know them initially and gain their trust, everything else will go quicker after. But if you don't, that's just going to really get in the way every time that you need, personal information or you need them to sign something. They're going to be questioning you every step of the way, fighting you every step of the way. And that's just going to make it 10 times harder. So that's just from my experience. And I feel like if we do that, take that approach and just prioritize them, it really does make it a lot smoother.
I love that. I think that's so true, especially for all of you kind of with the either going into healthcare-esque fields or psychology-based fields, really taking that nugget to heart of listen first, always listen first,
Mhm.
and solve the problem that the patient or the client or the whoever is presenting.
Mhm.
Then in doing that, you earn the trust to maybe, dive into some of those deeper issues
Exactly.
or bring those things to light. That's awesome. That's great. That's a great nugget.
Yes. So just to dive into some numbers, the more fun stuff. Uh, my program, Building Changes, the funder, I guess, of my program, um, I just pulled some statistics from their website here a couple days ago, and they had some interesting things to say. So right before COVID hit, there were more than 40,000 K to 12 students in Washington State that were experiencing homelessness during the academic school year. Now, if you compare that number to 10 years prior to that, so 2019 to 2020, so 10 years prior, 2009 to 2010, 10 years before that, that same study showed that the number was half of that. So
Wow.
it's doubled in the last 10 years. And you can only imagine what the COVID or what this pandemic has done to that number. Um, Academic outcomes for students experiencing homelessness lag behind those of students who are housed in all measures. That's things like English language arts, ranging to mathematic proficiency to on-time graduation. Student homelessness is a statewide issue. And what they're seeing is that the highest per capita rate of students experiencing homelessness in rural, or they're showing that the highest per capita rate of students experiencing homelessness is in rural communities. More than 60% of all students experiencing homelessness are students of color. This is all within Washington. 3 of every 4 students experiencing homelessness are in doubled up situations, staying with others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. And then students experiencing homelessness who live doubled up have similarly poor academic outcomes as those living unsheltered or in shelters or in hotel or motels. And then here at Stevens, another thing that we gauge is mobility rate. And right there, it looks like, or it shows that this year, just this year alone, it's fluctuated from 45 to 55%.
What's
Here.
mobility rate?
Okay, so mobility rate is students that are, initially signing up for the school, Stevens Elementary, for example, and then not completing the school years, so they end up moving somewhere else.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and the majority of that, well, the biggest contributor to that is homelessness, because they're not able to plant roots. They're not really able to stay in one place. They're always moving, always on the go. That affects everything else as well. So relationships, connections, making lasting friendships, connecting with their teachers. It seeps into every aspect of school life. Things like behavioral issue is a huge one. 90% of all the kids that me and my other counterparts have what we've noticed in the last 3-4 years that we've worked together and just done a study on the kids or the families that we've worked with and the kids specifically, is that 90+% of those kids have some sort of behavioral issues in school. And that can be from lack of sleep. That can be from lack of attention at home. violence at home, abuse, just all sorts of trauma that they're exposed to. So that, of course, it shows in their grades. Grades drop significantly because they're sleeping through class. Attention span is zilch. Attendance is spotty, tardies are frequent. All of those things are taking place.
Wow.
So there's a lot of sad in what I do. There's a lot of really heartbreaking stories that you'll hear in just social work in general. But there are also countless amazing testimonies that I could share with you. And I'll just share one just to finish my ramblings. I had a family that moved here right before COVID that was fleeing domestic violence. And this was a pretty large family. If I remember correctly, 8-person family. No job, poor rental history, poor credit. These are all things that you actually have to look at when you're trying to find someone a home. Rental history, credit, criminal history, all of those things. And they were lacking in all of these areas. Just negative or poor credit. They had criminal history. And mom, it just came in the office that first day, and she was just completely numb, depressed, anxious, hopeless. She had a newborn in her hands and no home to bring her to. After a really long conversation with mostly her speaking and just me listening, and a few words of encouragement and a lot of tears, a lot of tissues, and all of that, we were able to finally come out of that with an idea of how to move forward. We identified the problems that we needed to address, and at that time they were staying in their van, and when the weather was nice, they were camping outside. But shortly after, Dad got a full-time job, and we celebrated that together. And sometimes you really got to focus on the small things, because when they come to that initial meeting and they're just telling you everything that's not going right, all the just different areas that they lack in, and this is going wrong and that's going wrong, you really got to just focus in on the small things and just work it one step at a time. And every time you win a small victory, you got to celebrate that with them.
Yep.
Otherwise, you just get overwhelmed with the whole thing. So we celebrated, as soon as he got that job and, it was official when he was starting, we had a little celebration, brought them in and, provided some treats for the kids and, just giving them that praise that and confirmation that they need. Shortly after, one of my landlord friends, another reason why it's so important to have good connection and make or establish relationships with everyone that you work with and come into contact with. One of the landlords I had previously worked with and housed a family with called me and said that he had an opening and he needed to fill it. Just if I could send an application over that day, he'll get my family in the very next week. And that was that. He was willing to work with everything that they had, poor credit, all of that. We just paid a double deposit. So sometimes when you're negotiating for your clients, sometimes you'll pay a higher deposit if they have poor credit, or sometimes you have to write up appeal letters or letters of recommendation. You try to make do with what you have. And yeah, after all that advocating, they were able to get into their own place, despite all of the baggage and all of the hardships that they were currently dealing with, had dealt with. They were able to forge a new path, break generational cycles, because her mom, had gone through homelessness, and she was sort of coming from that. And, when you're able to see that, to witness that, them breaking that generational cycle and signing leases and getting keys to their new place. I mean, I think in the end, that's what it's all about. That's what makes it all worthwhile.
Hmm.
So, yeah. That's really me in a nutshell. That's what it looks like on a daily. I think one of the biggest things I'm really thankful for is that it's never the same.
Yeah.
It's every day is always different, and I kind of appreciate that. I do like change, and just asking, what can I do? How can I approach it? What should I change? Those are things that I think for me are strengths. And it just, everyone has their different approach to the game. You just take what really goes with your style and your personality, and you take it and run with it. But yeah, I hope that really helped you guys, and that bit of education was useful for you. So I will hand it back to you, Emma, or Emily, Marnie, if there are any questions.
Got a lot of things happening here. That was awesome. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you.
I had a quick question, Ty. I was wondering how, I'm just doing my student teaching, and I had a question about, can teachers reach out to social workers, or does it always have to be social workers reaching out, like, to students first?
No. Here at Stevens, I get my referrals from teachers all the time. If, for example, last month, one of the ELD teachers overheard a student say that they saw their friend come out of a shelter, and that's how that started that whole thing up.
Okay.
Yeah, I reached out to the kid and confirmed that. So yeah, teachers can definitely reach out to social workers anytime.
Sweet. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, if you know someone is literally homeless, what's the turnover rate for getting them into like a safe house? Or do you put them in a shelter, or if they're like living out of the car, like what does that situation look like on your end, and how long
Absolutely.
does it take?
Great question. It varies depending on the client, the situation. In my case, I house 95% of all the clients that I do their intake. The reason there's a 5% percentage that we miss is because they're moving out of state. And so the process really, it depends. So if they have everything together, if they're document ready, which is a huge thing as well. They have also, their social securities, birth certificates, all of that. And, they have a job and everything sort of in place. Depending on the housing market and availability, we could potentially get them housed within a week. I had a client who came in on Monday and we housed them on Thursday. So it really depends on their situation. I've also had a client who came to me the beginning of the year, but dropped off, meaning they lost contact with me. I drove out to the shelter that they were staying at, but found out that they left the shelter. I couldn't track them down. It took me 3 months to get them stabilized and in their own place, but it was a lot of playing tag and trying to find them. So it really depends on the situation. But generally, for community health workers in school, I want to say that we're pretty, and not to brag, but we're pretty successful, because they've sort of taken off the I guess they've really let us do what we need to do in order to be successful. So I can work from home. I can drive out all day trying to reach my clients. I'm not really limited to just staying at the office and having clients try to meet me, because a lot of my clients don't have transportation.
Yep.
A lot of my clients can't come to me, so I have to go out to them. I have to find them, under the bridge or downtown area, or just camping somewhere, and help them fill out paperwork right there in the middle of wherever they're at. So I'm really, I guess, grateful for that. But yeah, it's different based on the client and their situation.
I also have one more question too.
Yeah.
So do you or do teachers ever personally house like kids or families at their personal homes, or is that like a breach of professionalism, or how does that work?
I do. I go out with them, the signing the lease, all of that. So once they sign the release of information, I'm able to really work closely with them, with landlords, with school staff. So going into their homes, well, prior to COVID.
You don't let them stay at your house.
Oh, allow them to stay with me?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
No. We're not even allowed to give them a ride. So that's where I have.
Yeah.
That's where the gas cards and bus passes come into play. So we use different resources for that.
And that's, I think, super important, because there's once you're in it for any length of time, you start to hear just these heartbreaking stories, and you're like, I want all of you to have a safe place to live.
Yeah.
You just can't. Like, if
you can't do that.
if you let one person come and stay at your house, like, in my experience, desperate people do desperate things, not because they're trying to hurt whoever is helping them, but it's like that idea of, if you've ever been lifeguard trained, they say, be careful that the person who's swimming doesn't grab you and take you down. Like, you have to make sure that you're on your own lifeguard floaty thing.
Yeah.
That is a strict boundary that most professional helpers should have and maintain, just so you can continue to show up the next day for the next people.
So strictly speaking, in the professional world, I wouldn't recommend it. But if it's someone you knew, a friend, or just something like that, I would advise that you're sort of ready and you're really just looking inward, because living with people, we say that we love each other, and it might be your mom, or it might be someone really close, but there's always tension, because we like to do things our way, and everyone has that. So when you put all of that in one household, fireworks tend to go off.
It's just a risky enterprise.
Yeah.
I also had a question. So when you talk about two different things, where you talk about social work and being a community health worker, can you share what the difference is, and how somebody as a future helper would go about getting into those kind of positions?
Absolutely. So in my experience and in the role I'm in, the community health worker part, it's a little different to my social worker counterparts that are also within the Catholic Charity Organization, in the fact that we have different roles, different job descriptions. Mine is to specifically not only work with the family in getting them housed, because that really is the ultimate goal, but also to analyze, the mental health of the students, the family, how that's contributing to success or lack of success in the school. But yes, depending on certain organizations, like for example, Catholic Charities, you don't really need experience in this particular field to be hired or even promoted to management positions in Catholic Charities. So I think it depends on where you go and really what your heart is. I think you really got to look inward and find out what you truly love, because that's really important, because social work in general is very hard. It's not just just the paperwork and getting them from A to B. It's all the emotions. It's all the tangibles, everything that's involved with that. Sometimes it's hard to leave work at work in social work, if you guys get my meaning. A lot of that really bleeds into your life, your personal life, and social work is really something that you gotta make sure that you know what you're getting into, because it does involve really bridging yourself and the person you're assisting. And then at the end of the day, just knowing how to turn that switch off, leaving work at work. But yeah.
And you said too earlier, Ty, talking about like celebrating the little victories.
Yeah.
Like that's another way that you can show up the next day, is knowing like yesterday we did this.
Mm-hmm.
We can keep going. We can keep pushing. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Well, as we're ending coming to the end of our time here, is there any other ending questions people have? All right, well then I will say we are so thankful to have you, Ty.
Thank you.
I'm grateful that you were to share this information. If you guys are interested in finding out more about Ty or Family Promise in general, we have a link on Family Promise's website on how to get involved and how to learn more if you're interested, and feel free to reach out to us if you want any more information.
Also, infamous plug, shameless. Family Promise always has interns and volunteers. We construct a lot of our opportunities around our interns and volunteers. So if you're looking for something like that, feel free to check us out. Also, we will be having a Family Promise informational night here soonish. It's not on the calendar quite yet, but we'll make sure all of you that RSVP'd to this get a link to that. If you want to learn more about specifically how Family Promise kind of has our niche and what we do to tandem work with Ty and Stevens and Catholic Charities and all those other awesome options that families that need help are able to utilize. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here with us. We're excited to have you in, and we're hopeful. I think I speak for Ty and Emily and Marnie and myself when I say the first step in learning or changing anything is paying attention, is intentionally choosing to learn more about something and letting that kind of marinate in you. And so keep thinking about some of the things that were said, and reach out if you have questions. Nothing is off limits. And we all love talking about what we do in our jobs. So there is no shame and there are no stupid questions. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.